The Great Gatsby begins with a man looking backward, trying to understand a summer that changed him forever. The narrator, Nick Carraway, comes from the Midwest and arrives in New York in the summer of 1922 to learn the bond business. He is young, educated, observant, and not yet fully hardened by the world of money and ambition into which he is stepping. What he discovers is a glittering society filled with wealth, parties, beauty, and status, but also restlessness, dishonesty, and deep moral emptiness. At the center of this world stands J. Gatsby, a mysterious millionaire who seems to have everything except peace. What begins as a story of fascination gradually becomes a tragedy about longing, illusion, class, and the dangerous belief that the past can be recovered if only one reaches far enough toward it. Nick rents a small house in West Egg, a Long Island community known for its newly rich residents. His modest cottage sits beside an enormous mansion belonging to a man he has never met, J. Gatsby. Across the bay in East Egg live Nick's cousin Daisy Buchanan and her husband Tom, who belong to an older, more established kind of wealth. The difference between West Egg and East Egg is subtle but powerful. West Egg represents new money, people who have become rich but lack the inherited polish of the social elite. East Egg represents old money, privilege that feels entitled, effortless, and secure. Nick, standing between these worlds, becomes the perfect witness. He is close enough to enter them, but distant enough to observe their contradictions. From the beginning, the setting itself tells us that this is not only a love story, but also a story about class, performance, and the American dream turned into display. Soon after arriving, Nick visits Daisy and Tom Buchanan at their fashionable home in East Egg. The evening introduces the novel's emotional and moral atmosphere with quiet force. Daisy is beautiful, charming, and graceful, with a voice that seems to enchant everyone who hears it. Yet beneath her brightness lies a kind of fragility, as though she has long learned to hide discomfort beneath elegance. Tom, by contrast, is physically powerful, wealthy, arrogant, and used to having his will obeyed. He carries himself like a man convinced the world belongs to him. Also present is Jordan Baker, a cool and self-contained professional golfer whose manner suggests sophistication mixed with carelessness. During dinner, Tom receives a phone call from his mistress in New York, and the fact is treated not as a shocking secret, but almost as an inconvenience everyone is expected to endure. Nick leaves that evening with the uneasy sense that beauty and corruption live side by side in this world. That night, back at his rented house, Nick sees something strange. Gatsby, his mysterious neighbor, stands alone on the lawn, stretching his arms toward the dark water. At the end of the dock across the bay burns a small green light. Gatsby seems to reach toward it as though it were not merely a lamp, but a promise, a memory, or a destiny. The moment is brief and quiet, yet it becomes one of the most important images in the novel. Gatsby is rich enough to own a mansion, to fill it with guests, and to make himself a legend. Yet here he is, alone and yearning. The green light suggests that what he wants cannot be held in his hands, no matter how much money he accumulates. Long before Nick understands Gatsby's history, he sees that the man is driven by a hope so powerful it has become almost sacred. Nick soon sees more directly the ugliness beneath Tom Buchanan's privilege. Tom takes him into the city, and on the way they stop in a bleak industrial area known as the Valley of Ashes, a gray wasteland lying between the glitter of Long Island and the energy of New York City. There lives George Wilson, a tired garage owner, and his wife Myrtle, who is Tom's mistress. Myrtle is lively, dissatisfied, and hungry for the glamour that surrounds wealthy men like Tom. Tom, using money and dominance, keeps her in a false world of indulgence and illusion. He rents an apartment in the city for their meetings, where they stage a parody of elegance through drinking, gossip, and careless display. Yet the illusion shatters quickly. Tom's brutality surfaces when Myrtle speaks Daisy's name too boldly, and he strikes her without hesitation. In that violent moment, the cruelty beneath his polished world becomes impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Gatsby's mansion becomes the center of West Egg's social life. Night after night, crowds pour through its gates to attend extravagant parties filled with music, laughter, dancing, alcohol, and endless speculation. Most of the guests have never met Gatsby personally. They invent stories about him as they drink his champagne and use his house as a stage for their own pleasure. Some claim he once killed a man. Others say he was a German spy during the war. No one seems to know the truth, and many do not care. Gatsby himself becomes a myth created by the fantasies of those around him. Nick eventually receives an actual invitation, a rare thing among the uninvited masses. At the party, he finally meets Gatsby and is surprised. The host is younger, more courteous, and less theatrical than the rumors suggest. He speaks with peculiar charm, and though everything around him is excessive, Gatsby himself remains oddly set apart from the chaos he has created. When Nick meets Gatsby face to face, the mystery deepens rather than clears. Gatsby has a smile that creates instant trust, a smile that seems to make whoever receives it feel deeply seen and understood. Yet there is also something rehearsed in his manner, as though he has studied how to appear exactly as others wish him to be. He uses formal phrases, refers to people as old sport, and presents fragments of a life story that sound polished but uncertain. Nick is drawn to him and skeptical at the same time. Gatsby is not simply a rich man throwing parties for amusement. There is intention behind his extravagance, some hidden purpose shaping everything he does. Jordan Baker eventually tells Nick the secret at the heart of Gatsby's life. Years ago, Gatsby and Daisy were in love. Gatsby has bought his mansion across the bay from her house for one reason alone, so that she might one day see him again. Before the war, Gatsby had met Daisy when he was still a young officer without wealth. She was beautiful, desired, and surrounded by privilege. To Gatsby, Daisy became more than a woman. She became the embodiment of everything shining, distant, and perfect that he longed for. They fell in love, but while Gatsby was away at war, Daisy married Tom Buchanan, who could offer what Gatsby at that time could not: enormous wealth, social security, and immediate status. Gatsby never accepted that loss. Instead, he built his entire future around the belief that once he became rich enough, he could return and recover the life that had slipped away. His dream is not merely to see Daisy again. It is to undo time, erase her marriage, and step back into the exact moment before everything went wrong. This dream is grand, beautiful, and doomed from the very beginning. At Gatsby's request, Nick agrees to arrange a meeting between Gatsby and Daisy at his own small house. The reunion is one of the most emotionally delicate scenes in the novel. Gatsby, who can command wealth, servants, cars, and crowds, becomes almost helpless with nervousness. He arrives early, anxious and uncertain, like a man facing judgment. Daisy comes without fully understanding what awaits her. When they first meet again, the awkwardness is almost unbearable. Years of memory and longing stand between them. But gradually the tension softens, and old feeling seems to reawaken. Gatsby glows with joy. Daisy is overwhelmed, touched, and carried into the emotional force of the moment. Nick, realizing he is intruding on something larger than himself, quietly leaves them together. In that small house, Gatsby believes his dream is finally beginning to become real. Gatsby brings Daisy and Nick to his mansion, eager to display everything he has created. He shows Daisy his rooms, his gardens, his possessions, and especially his clothing, as though every object were proof of his worthiness. In one of the novel's most famous moments, Daisy begins to cry over Gatsby's beautiful shirts. Her tears are not simple. They express beauty, regret, shock, and the painful recognition of what has been lost and what cannot be cleanly recovered. Gatsby believes he is showing Daisy the life they can now live together, but the scene also suggests something more unstable. His wealth is real, yet it is being used to support an emotional fantasy. He has created not just a fortune, but a stage on which he hopes the past can be performed again. Nick begins to understand that Gatsby's devotion is not ordinary love. It is a dream fed by memory, imagination, and desire until Daisy herself can no longer fully contain it. For a time, Daisy and Gatsby see each other often, and Gatsby seems almost triumphant. He stops holding his huge parties because they are no longer necessary. Their purpose was only ever to attract Daisy. Yet, even in these happier days, cracks begin to appear. Daisy cannot truly become the perfect figure Gatsby has preserved in his mind. She is charming, but she is also careless, weak, and deeply tied to the world of wealth and comfort she has chosen. Gatsby wants her not merely to love him now, but to say she never loved Tom at all. He wants the past to be corrected exactly according to his dream. Nick, watching closely, senses the danger. No person can fully satisfy an ideal built over years of longing. The more Gatsby insists on absolute fulfillment, the more fragile the illusion becomes. Nick gradually learns more about Gatsby's origins. He was born James Gatz, the son of poor farmers in the Midwest, and from an early age, he rejected the limits of the life into which he was born. He imagined himself into a new identity, turning self-invention into a kind of religion. Gatsby did not simply want success. He wanted transformation. Wealth would not only enrich him, it would make him into the man he believed he was meant to be. To achieve that fortune, however, he entered a world of crime and corruption, likely working with gamblers and bootleggers. Gatsby's greatness lies partly in the scale of his hope, but his tragedy lies in what that hope requires. He builds an ideal self through questionable means, believing that if the dream is noble enough, the path toward it can be overlooked. Nick is fascinated by this contradiction. Gatsby is both admirable and deeply compromised. Tom Buchanan soon becomes aware that Daisy and Gatsby are involved, and his reaction is shaped less by love than by possessiveness and injured pride. Tom has no problem maintaining his own affair, but he cannot tolerate losing control over his wife. At the same time, he is threatened by Gatsby's rise. Gatsby may be rich, but he is not from Tom's world. Tom instinctively recognizes him as an outsider, a man of new money, uncertain background, and socially questionable legitimacy. Tom's contempt is sharpened by class arrogance. He begins investigating Gatsby's business dealings and prepares to expose him. The conflict between the two men is more than romantic rivalry. It is also a struggle between inherited privilege and self-made ambition, between old money that assumes its right to rule and new money that tries to force its way into an established order. The emotional climax of the novel takes place on a suffocatingly hot day in New York. The heat seems to press on every conversation, magnifying irritation, jealousy, and exhaustion. Gatsby, Daisy, Tom, Nick, and Jordan travel into the city together, and what has long been hidden can no longer remain quiet. They gather in a hotel room, where Tom openly confronts Gatsby. What follows is not merely an argument, but the collapse of Gatsby's dream under pressure. Gatsby insists that Daisy never loved Tom. Tom exposes Gatsby's criminal background and accuses him of being nothing but a bootlegger who has dressed himself in borrowed elegance. Daisy, torn and frightened, cannot give Gatsby the total declaration he demands. In that moment, everything becomes clear. She may love Gatsby in some way, but not enough to abandon the world she knows. Gatsby's dream was built on the belief that desire could conquer reality. In the hotel room, reality wins. After the confrontation, the group leaves the city in a state of emotional ruin. Daisy drives Gatsby's car back toward Long Island, with Gatsby beside her. Tom, Nick and Jordan follow in another car. On the road through the Valley of Ashes, catastrophe strikes. Myrtle Wilson, desperate, agitated, and believing the car may belong to Tom, runs into the street. Daisy hits her and keeps going. Myrtle is killed instantly. The scene is brutal and sudden, and it marks the moment when private corruption produces irrevocable public destruction. Gatsby, however, refuses to blame Daisy. He is willing to protect her at any cost, even now, when the possibility of their shared future is already collapsing. His loyalty is absolute, but it also reveals how completely he remains trapped inside his dream. Even after disaster, he still imagines he can save Daisy and preserve what they had. That night, Gatsby waits outside Daisy's home to ensure she is safe, convinced perhaps that she still belongs to him in spirit, if not in fact. Nick, who has seen enough by now to understand more than Gatsby does, realizes that Daisy and Tom are not breaking apart. Inside the house, the two of them sit together in quiet complicity, bound not by innocence or tenderness, but by their shared carelessness and their confidence that money will protect them. Gatsby remains outside, alone with his devotion, guarding a woman who will not choose him. Few scenes in the novel are sadder. Gatsby, for all his wealth and ambition, is reduced to waiting in the dark like a man standing outside his own vanished future. Nick begins to see with painful clarity that Gatsby's greatness lies not in success, but in the intensity of the dream that is now dying. In the Valley of Ashes, George Wilson is destroyed by Myrtle's death. Unlike Tom and Daisy, he has neither wealth nor emotional armor. He is left with grief, confusion, and desperation. Tom, protecting himself and Daisy, points Wilson toward Gatsby by identifying Gatsby's yellow car. This act is both cowardly and deadly. Tom knows enough to shift blame away from his own household, and he does so without hesitation. Wilson, broken and half-mad with sorrow, becomes an instrument of the destruction already set in motion by the wealthy and careless. Austen-like moral balance is absent here. Fitzgerald's world is harsher. The innocent do not triumph, and the guilty are often protected. George, one of the least powerful people in the novel, is left to carry the emotional ruin created by people far above him in wealth and status. The next day, Gatsby remains at home, waiting, perhaps still hoping Daisy will call. He drifts in his swimming pool, suspended between the luxurious life he built and the emptiness now closing around him. George Wilson arrives, convinced that Gatsby was both Myrtle's lover and her killer. He shoots Gatsby and then turns the gun on himself. The dream ends not with a heroic gesture, but with senseless, lonely violence. Gatsby dies at the very moment when his life has been stripped of illusion. Daisy does not come. His house is quiet. The crowds who once filled his parties are absent. The tragedy is total because Gatsby, for all his corruption and delusion, possessed something rare in the novel's world: hope. His hope was misguided, but it was genuine. And in a society ruled by carelessness and self-interest, that genuine hope makes his death feel larger than the fate of a single man. After Gatsby's death, Nick is left to deal with the aftermath, and what he discovers is almost as tragic as the death itself. The people who filled Gatsby's mansion with noise and laughter vanish completely. No one wants responsibility. No one wants to be associated with the end of the story. Daisy and Tom leave town without giving any forwarding address. Phone calls go unanswered. The glamorous world that fed on Gatsby's generosity reveals its emptiness with shocking clarity. In life, Gatsby attracted a crowd. In death, he is nearly abandoned. Nick arranges the funeral almost alone. This part of the novel strips away the last illusions of social brightness. Wealth created spectacle, but not loyalty. Popularity created noise, but not love. Gatsby's loneliness in death reveals the true nature of the society he longed to join. One of the few people who does come to Gatsby's funeral is his father, a poor and humble man from the Midwest. His presence introduces a deeply human contrast to the emptiness surrounding Gatsby's glittering life. Gatsby's father is proud of his son, proud even of the mansion and the visible signs of success. He shows Nick a schedule and self-improvement plan Gatsby made as a boy, evidence of the disciplined ambition that drove him from the beginning. In that moment, Gatsby's dream appears again in a different light. Before it became entangled with crime, vanity, and obsession, it was simply the fierce determination of a poor boy who believed he could become more than the world expected. The tragedy of Gatsby is not that he dreamed, but that his dream attached itself to the wrong symbols and the wrong people. The events of the summer leave Nick deeply disillusioned. The East, which once seemed full of possibility, now appears morally distorted to him. He sees Tom and Daisy as careless people who smash things and retreat into their money, leaving others to clean up the damage. He sees the culture of wealth as hollow, sustained by surfaces and shielded from consequence. For all Gatsby's corruption, Nick concludes that Gatsby was worth more than the others because he possessed some capacity for wonder and devotion that the Buchanans never had. Nick's judgment is not simple admiration. He knows Gatsby lied, broke laws, and lived by illusion. But he also knows that in a world ruled by cynicism, Gatsby's extraordinary hope gave him a kind of tragic nobility. In the end, Nick decides to return to the Midwest, away from the glittering emptiness of the East. Daisy Buchanan is one of the most elusive figures in the novel because she exists both as a person and as a symbol. As a person, she is charming, emotional, weak, and deeply shaped by the comforts of wealth. She is capable of tenderness, but not of moral courage. She responds to beauty and feeling, yet retreats when those feelings demand sacrifice. For Gatsby, however, Daisy represents much more than herself. She becomes the golden object of all his striving: love, status, beauty, class, and the promise that life can be perfected. That is why Gatsby cannot truly see her as she is. The real Daisy is smaller than the dream built around her. Fitzgerald suggests that part of the tragedy lies in this difference between reality and desire. Gatsby does not merely love Daisy. He worships what she seems to promise, and no human being can live up to that kind of worship. At its deepest level, The Great Gatsby is a novel about the American dream, the belief that ambition, reinvention, and desire can create a better life. Gatsby embodies that dream in its most dramatic form. He rises from poverty, invents himself, acquires enormous wealth, and refuses to accept the limits imposed by birth. In that sense, he is powerfully American. But Fitzgerald also shows how the dream has become corrupted. Wealth no longer serves freedom or moral growth. Instead, it serves display, status, and carelessness. Gatsby's dream is immense, yet it is directed toward recovering a romanticized past and entering a social class that remains spiritually empty. His ambition is both magnificent and misguided. The dream survives in him, but the world around him has turned it into something glittering and hollow. In the end, The Great Gatsby remains powerful because it speaks to the human tendency to build life around longing. Gatsby believes that through wealth, desire, and sheer force of will, he can reclaim what time has taken from him. That belief is tragic, but also deeply recognizable. Many people live by some version of Gatsby's hope that the perfect love, perfect status, or perfect future lies just beyond reach if only they strive hard enough. Fitzgerald's genius lies in showing both the beauty and the danger of that hope. Gatsby is destroyed by illusion, but he is also made extraordinary by his refusal to live without wonder. The novel closes with one of literature's great images: human beings forever moving forward while being pulled backward by memory. In that tension between aspiration and loss, The Great Gatsby finds its lasting truth.